At 6, Westminster waits for the report that could determine the Prime Minister's future as he rejects calls for him to resign. At Prime Minister's questions, Boris Johnson said he was getting on with the job, amid more questions about what the investigation into Downing Street parties will reveal.
The Ministerial Code says that ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation. Does the Prime Minister believe that applies to him?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course, but let me tell the House that I think he's inviting a question about an investigation which, as you know, Mr. Speaker, I can't comment.
Also on the programme tonight. The numbers are falling. Just under 3 million people had COVID in the UK last week, but infections among school children are on the rise. Russia carries out military exercises close to the Ukrainian border as the US says it fears President Putin could use force against Ukraine within weeks. And the story of the little girl who vanished for days in Australia more than half a century ago now finally answers about what happened to her.
Coming up in Sports Day later in the hour on the BBC News channel, champions once again, Alfie Hewitt and Gordon Reid continue their winning run in the wheelchair doubles to set a Grand Slam record.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Prime Minister has vowed to fight on amid more calls for him to resign as Westminster waits for the publication of Sue Gray's highly anticipated report into parties in Downing Street during lockdown. During Prime Minister's questions today, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, urged Boris Johnson to publish the official report in full once it's been released. The Metropolitan Police is carrying out its own probe to establish if the gatherings broke coronavirus legislation. Number 10 has said Mr Johnson doesn't believe he has broken the law. Here's our political editor, Laura Kunsberg.
Busy, doing nothing much, waiting, wondering if the findings of a report into rule-breaking in Downing Street will make life impossible for Boris Johnson. Other ministers trying to concentrate on serious matters of the day.
Can you survive this, Prime Minister?
Anxiety, anticipation about what the next few hours would bring. The Prime Minister eager not to show any nerves to his backbench troops. Cheered at lunchtime, but with questions pressing, can that mood prevail?
How much damage are the Prime Minister and his Cabinet prepared to do to save his skin?
Minister.
Let me just remind the House of what's been going on in Downing Street. We've been prioritising the COVID backlogs, Mr. Speaker.
And when the official verdict into what really went on is ready, will we see it all?
Can the Prime Minister confirm that he will publish the full Sue Gray report as he receives it?
Of course I will do exactly what I said.
Remember, the official civil service inquiry isn't the only one that lurks.
We now have the shameful spectacle of a Prime Minister of the United Kingdom being subject to a police investigation. Isn't this a Prime Minister and a government that have shown nothing but contempt for the decency, honesty and respect that define this country?
And for all sorts of reasons, many people may want me out of the way, but I tell you the reason he wants me out of the way is because he knows that this government can be trusted to deliver. And in particular, I am getting on with the job.
A public show of force. But it's the private world behind Number 10's show that's been exposed.
It was a business meeting.
Allegations of parties in the press office exploded with a cringe-worthy video of staffers joking about how they'd explain it away.
Socially distanced. Can you stop? I'm going to make a statement. You don't.
The tears of the former press spokesperson Allegra Stratton, the first casualty of this whole mess. Then admissions of various other gatherings in Whitehall when the country was locked down. Revelations of bring-your-own booze drinks in the Downing Street garden, organised by none other than Martin Reynolds, one of the most senior staff by Boris Johnson's side. A basement booze up during the national mourning for Prince Philip. And then just this week, news of a birthday celebration for the Prime Minister in the Cabinet room during lockdown.
Lulu, why did you go to Boris Johnson's party?
Lulu Little, the interior designer of the renovation of the number 10 flat, briefly there, along with Boris Johnson's wife. The painful question all the way through: how could the people who wrote the lockdown rules have broken them too? This whole place is in a deeply uncomfortable limbo. The report into what went on in Downing Street is still not out, even though it was essentially complete apart from last-minute checks last night. The questions about the integrity and truthfulness of what happened have still not been answered. And just when those doubts are swirling thick and fast, a new, separate contradiction has emerged. Remember this? The desperate images of the evacuation of Kabul when it fell to the Taliban.
Some of these dogs have been found.
There were claims that the Prime Minister interfered to prioritise rescuing animals from a British man pen farthings charity. That was fiercely denied at the time. But emails published by a Westminster committee today give a very different picture, referring to the Prime Minister's decision, saying in writing the Prime Minister has just authorised their staff and animals to be evacuated. That's a total contradiction of what Boris Johnson said last month.
Did you intervene that way?
No, that's complete nonsense. But
marrying up different versions of events has been part of this government's problem. MPs sent home tonight without the official report into parties coming out. So accusations hover, still waiting for a verdict. The Prime Minister hopes for political escape. And Sophie, despite the public anger about everything that's going on, that's felt by many people, despite the anxiety for many Conservative MPs about what's going on and Downing Street's handling of the last few torrid weeks, Boris Johnson appeared today to have not the faintest intention of going anywhere, no matter what happens in the next few days. But with that report tonight, as we speak, still not even delivered to Downing Street, his political future still hangs very much in the balance. The uncertainty has been prolonged by the fact the report still hasn't come out today, and that prolongs the political agony for number 10 and Boris Johnson's colleagues.
Our political editor, Laura Kunsberg, thank you. Just under 3 million people in the UK had coronavirus last week, according to the latest research. That's roughly 1 in 20 people, a fall of 500,000 from the week before. But the number of children getting COVID has increased. In Northern Ireland, the use of vaccine passports in pubs, restaurants and cinemas has today been scrapped. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, has the latest.
It's the last day in England for compulsory mask wearing in some indoor public spaces. Tomorrow, Plan B measures will end, with COVID passes as well as face coverings no longer mandatory. But some, like Tom, are anxious that people remain cautious. He has an immune deficiency and knows he's at higher risk from COVID.
Putting a mask on may restrict you for the 1 minute that you're in the shop or the 2 minutes you do your grocery shopping, but actually it will make the individual feel better. It'll allow them to live more of a normal life, and it will definitely reduce their anxiety. So just awareness of others would be amazing.
Restrictions in Northern Ireland are being eased today, with nightclubs reopening and indoor standing events such as concerts allowed again, though proof of vaccination or a negative test result will be required.
The latest Office for National Statistics survey suggests there were just under 3 million people who had the virus in the UK last week. That was down, though falling at a slower rate than before. In England, where 1 in 20 had the virus, Wales 1 in 30 and Scotland 1 in 30, case rates were lower. But in Northern Ireland, with 1 in 20, the trend was said to be uncertain.
At the population level, things are looking much better than they were a few weeks ago. Most, if not all of the indicators are moving in the right direction. And that's good news. We just need to keep a steady state and watch, of course, the changes that are being introduced in terms of policies, what their impact will be on infections in the community.
Infections in England fell in all age groups except among children. Since the return of schools earlier this month, cases have picked up, with increases in the last week among primary and secondary school pupils.
We've got children off across the school. I think we're up to high 20s now of children who've tested positive. But on top of that, we've got staff whose perhaps children have tested positive, so they're trying to juggle childcare with their partners. It's really difficult.
The question now, will infections rising among children spread through to older age groups? There's uncertainty too about new variants. There is one under investigation by health chiefs in the UK after evidence of growth in Denmark. Experts, though, say it's early days, more data is needed, and there is, as of now, no cause for concern. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Well, the latest coronavirus figures show there were more than 102,000 new infections in the latest 24-hour period. It means there were 92,000 new cases on average per day in the last week. The number of people in hospital with COVID has fallen again. It is just over 16,500. Another 346 deaths were reported. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive test. On average, in the past week, there were 262 deaths per day. On vaccinations, just over 37 million people have had a booster jab. That's nearly 64.5% of those aged 12 and over. So from tomorrow, the legal requirement for face coverings in public places in England will be dropped, but some businesses, transport and retailers are still advising customers to wear them. Our correspondent Coletta Smith joins me now from Manchester. Coletta.
Hi there, Sophie. Yeah, from tomorrow morning here in England, you won't have to wear a mask if you're going into the shops, if you're using public transport, if you're in those public areas that until now you've had to wear masks for. But that, of course, plunges customers back into that difficult situation, that grey area that we all are facing, of really facing different rules and requirements depending exactly where you are, because different retailers today say they are going to be making different requests of their customers. We've heard from Sainsbury's and John Lewis, who of course run Waitrose as well, saying they are going to be urging their customers, the signs will stay up, they'll still be making those tannoy announcements to say please continue to wear your masks. At the other end, we've got Morrison's saying they're just going to stick to the government guidance, Currys saying they'll be asking their staff to wear masks but not necessarily their customers. When it comes to transport though, the picture is different across England, where we have Transport for London, the Tube and the buses there requiring passengers to wear masks, whereas that's not the case here in Manchester and elsewhere across the UK. And of course, in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, worth reiterating that you still need to wear your mask whether you're shopping or on public transport.
Coletta, thank you. The United States has urged its citizens to leave Ukraine, warning that Russian troops massed on its border could use force within weeks. In the past hour, the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, told Russia that there could be no compromise on the issue of Ukraine's sovereignty. Moscow has deployed an estimated 100,000 soldiers near the border in both Belarus and Russia. President Putin has accused Western nations of aggressive expansion into Russia's sphere of influence. He claims one of his key concerns is the expansion of NATO, the military alliance of European states with the US and Canada. Many countries in Eastern Europe became members after the fall of the Soviet Union. Our correspondent in Kiev, Sarah Rainsford, has been out in the city to see if people are preparing for all-out war.
Matches, needle, etc., medicals and bandage, medicine.
Yuri is getting ready for a war he hopes he never sees. He's packed an emergency bag to grab and go if Russian bombs or troops reach Kiev. A basic survival kit for the worst possible scenario.
What does it actually feel like to be doing this?
It's unbelievable. So I understand that I'm living now in 21st century. I'm amazed that I should do this, that I should pack this bag, but this is what I have to do to keep my family safe.
Yuri thinks a major escalation in Ukraine's 8-year-long war with Russia is unlikely. He just feels better being prepared for it. There's no sense of tension on the streets here. Ukraine calls Western talk of a major Russian incursion alarmist. But the government's not ignoring the build-up of troops on its border.
A few weeks ago, the authorities here actually released a map with all the bomb shelters. And just look at it, there's thousands of them, 5,000 in fact, all over the city.
Marking a map, though, is the easy bit.
The door's locked. And this is one of the official bomb shelters, supposedly. So either nobody here is expecting war to break out any minute now, or they're just not very well prepared for it.
The metro might be a safer bet deep below ground. If the air raid siren sounds, people will have 20 minutes to get down here.
There's so much talk now outside Ukraine about the possibility of the conflict escalating, of an imminent Russian invasion. And it's quite weird being here inside Kiev itself and realising that people are just going about their ordinary lives. There's no sense of panic here at all. Do you think it's possible that the conflict could actually reach Kiev?
I don't know. I don't have any information about it. So I'm just living my best life right now and hoping that everything will be okay.
Did you make any kind of preparations or any emergency?
No.
So as Western governments wrestle with Moscow's ultimatums and demands, Ukrainians, for now, are getting on with a life they've long lived in the shadow of Russian threats and aggression. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Kiev.
Well, our correspondent Barbara Plett-Usher joins us now from Washington, where the US Secretary of State has been giving Washington's latest response to Russia's demands over Ukraine. What has he been saying?
He's saying that the Americans have delivered a paper to the Russian Foreign Ministry, and this is the written response for which Russia was waiting. Now, it doesn't contain any surprises, but it does mean that the diplomatic channels are going to remain open for now. And the Americans have again rejected in writing Russia's main demands, which are to deny NATO membership to Ukraine and pull back NATO's presence from Eastern Europe. But they have also outlined areas where they see common ground, where they feel they could engage with Russia's security concerns on issues like arms control and military exercises. That falls way short of what Russia wants, and the Russian foreign minister has said the Kremlin will not let its proposals be drowned in endless discussions. But at the same time, he is set to meet the U.S. Secretary of State on the basis of this paper that has been delivered, so those discussions will continue.
Barbara Plett-Usher, thank you. The time is just after 6:15, our top story this evening. Westminster waits for the report that could determine the Prime Minister's future amid more calls for him to resign. 1 million face masks sent to frontline NHS staff at the height of the pandemic. How a highly critical report has now described them as counterfeit.
Coming up in Sports Day in the next 15 minutes on the BBC News channel, we'll have the latest from the Africa Cup of Nations in Cameroon. Will it be Egypt or Ivory Coast that reach the quarter-finals?
The BBC's Ashley John-Baptiste grew up in care. He always thought he was an only child. But years later, out of the blue, he received a message from a man who said he was his older brother. He says the discovery had a profound effect on his life, and he set out to discover how many other siblings are separated by the care system and what impact it has on their lives. By law, brothers and sisters should be kept together where possible, but new information from more than 200 local authorities has revealed that around half of sibling groups in care are currently split up.
I was only a toddler when I entered the care system, and I didn't leave until I was 18. To the knowledge of my various social workers and foster parents, I had no siblings. I was an only child.
Check what happens in my mid to late 20s, as I'm still coming to terms with my own childhood. I get a message from a man on Facebook who tells me that he's my brother. It was completely crazy because for a long time, I thought that I was kind of isolated in terms of family, that I didn't have anyone.
This personal revelation made me think about the state of sibling relationships in today's care system, so I decided to investigate. Freedom of information requests sent to over 200 UK local authorities have revealed that more than 12,000 looked after children are not living with at least one of their siblings. In their adoptive home, Saskia and her two brothers suffered physical abuse and neglect for a decade. When they went back into council care, they were separated across different areas.
I lost such a key part of myself, I think, because it was like, it's us three against the world, you know, it always has been. And so being so far away from them, it's like, oh, I'm not as strong anymore.
The law says siblings should be placed together when it's safe and possible to do so. Where this is not appropriate, contact should be prioritised if this is right for the child.
How are you feeling about meeting your brothers?
Excited.
Yeah?
Yeah.
In Scotland, new laws are giving siblings more control over their relationships. Karen Morrison is a veteran foster carer instrumental in these changes.
Our family are foster carers, and it didn't take long
for us to realise, you know, that these children are going into the care system and they're not going to the same place together. In fact, they don't even know when they're going to see each other again. Just imagine that trauma. Must be awful.
Karen also runs Siblings Were United, a charity providing a safe space for split-up sibling groups in care to meet every few months.
How excited have you guys been to meet today?
Good. 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10?
Just because I know it's Halloween and we're going to do something. 9,000.
9,000.
An independent review of the England care system is currently underway, with findings and recommendations expected to be published later this year. In Scotland, new laws are giving siblings more control over their relationships. For these brothers, however, it's time to say bye for now.
Bye. Oh.
Ashley Jean-Baptiste, BBC News.
The Metropolitan Police has referred itself to the watchdog, the IOPC, over the death of a woman who was stabbed in North London by her former partner. He was then killed by a passing motorist. A warrant had been issued for the arrest of Leon McCasker 3 weeks before he attacked Yasmin Shkaifi. There are growing calls for the motorist who drove into him as he stabbed his former partner not to face a criminal investigation. 1 million face masks designed for use by frontline NHS staff were sent out to hospitals at the height of the pandemic despite warnings about their effectiveness. In a confidential government report seen by BBC News, the masks were described as counterfeit. The report said health officials had been dismissive of concerns at the time and hadn't listened to warnings about the authenticity of the masks. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning has the story.
1 million masks, described by a confidential report obtained by BBC News as counterfeits. Yet, doctors and nurses had no idea they'd left them exposed. It took the detective work of one nurse to find out what had happened. In autumn 2020, staff in the most high-risk areas wore these masks. A health and safety executive official had warned they shouldn't be distributed. Despite hospitals complaining about them, with one hospital saying they failed tests 60% of the time, they continued to be used. One of these substandard masks failed while worn by a hospital worker. The report says that was then attributed to them getting COVID symptoms.
These are the filtering masks.
But it's clear there were concerns.
These masks were being used almost exclusively in the highest risk procedures where the risk of the wearer was the greatest. And therefore, that's why it's really, really worrying to find that actually these masks were not protecting people as they should have done.
It took a nurse in the Midlands carrying out their own checks. They emailed the Chinese manufacturer Fangtian and were told they were counterfeit.
You bought wrong goods from the worst person who made fake goods,
the company wrote. The report says some facts remain unclear, and the supplier Polyco has serious misgivings about Fangtian's claims the masks were fake. But when the Department of Health then contacted the manufacturer directly, they were told,
the masks you got do not have a certificate. I'm sorry that you got the faked goods from bad guys.
The report says health officials pressed to get the masks into hospitals, and the pressure to get hold of them could have contributed to the failure to notice any red flags. The findings are stark. The initial due diligence to check the authenticity of the masks fell far short of the standards required.
The report says the masks did pass tests to a lower clinical standard, and Polyco believes it bought them from a reputable supplier with proper documentation. The Department of Health said the safety of frontline staff is our top priority, and it's wrong to suggest the department ignored complaints. They said processes had been strengthened. But it's a worrying tale of how those on the front line couldn't rely on the protection they were given. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
Now to the story of an amazing reunion. More than 50 years after a toddler was found wandering alone miles from her home in Australia. Kathy Rethman's disappearance in 1968 sparked a huge search, one that fortunately had a happy ending. Until now, though, she never really knew who had rescued her. But all these years later, our correspondent John Kay finally found the answer while he was researching the story of another missing child, as he now explains.
June 1968, and Cathy Rethman was safe. The toddler had been missing for 3 days, but she was found alone in New South Wales, almost 20 miles from home.
Hi, John.
Now a grandma, this is the first time Cathy's ever spoken publicly about what happened.
The person that took me didn't hurt me.
The only thing Cathy could tell her parents was that there was a man. And the only clue, whoever took her from the family home cut her hair. Nobody was ever charged.
I can only remember a dog and a room, being in a room. Someone coming in, opening this door and saying, go to sleep. I do remember that, and the dog under my bed. It was a big dog. I think it was an Alsatian.
What's it like for you now, even now, not really knowing where you were and who you were with during those few days?
It's mind-boggling.
I came across Cathy's story while I was making the BBC podcast series Fairy Meadow, about the disappearance of Cheryl Grimmer in Australia at around the same time. She was never found, and the two cases have never been formally linked.
Of course, I feel like the luckiest lady in the world.
Cathy was found wandering in a creek by some schoolboys who were skipping lessons, but she's never seen them since.
What would you say to them?
Thank you. I mean, thank you wouldn't be enough for saving your life, because what I've got now is my family, and I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for them.
I want to introduce you to somebody.
Who's that?
Hello. Mark.
Hello. Oh my God.
How are you?
I'm good.
Long time no see.
This is Mark. So Mark Byrne was one of those 3 boys who found you.
We were wagging school. Like we weren't good boys at school, but we had a good outcome that day.
Thank you so much for wagging school. I can't believe it. This is a dream. I've just wanted to thank you, and oh my God, thank you's not enough. I love you, and you're always going to be my hero. You're always going to be my hero.
5 decades on, at least one mystery has been solved. John Kay, BBC News.
What a wonderful reunion. And you can listen to the latest episodes of John's fascinating podcast series Fairy Meadow on BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Darren Better's here to bring us some sunshine.
Yeah, some sunshine. More sunshine to come tomorrow, actually, Sophie. And it was so nice to get some sunshine today across more of England and Wales after all this dull, gloomy weather. It's not been a dry January in the northwest of Scotland. It's been very wet earlier on today in Highland once again. That rain is clearing away from here and it's heading its way southwards on this weather front. That is weakening, though, so the rain is becoming lighter and more patchy as it moves southwards, mainly heading down into western parts of England and Wales. Very windy weather for a while in Caithness and Orkney, and it should be a frost-free night tonight as the winds are picking up and that cloud moves southwards, milder than last night for northern England, Wales and the Midlands where we had a touch of frost. This is where the cloud is on Thursday morning. There's not much rain by this stage. It does move away out towards the Channel Islands. Sunshine then follows on behind a northwesterly wind which will drag in a few showers, mainly for northern and western parts of Scotland. Many places dry and sunny, and whilst it's a bit colder than of late in northern parts of Scotland, it's not particularly chilly out there tomorrow. Enjoy the sunshine. That weather front is out of the way. High pressure builds in behind that, so it will turn a bit chilly overnight. And then we've got this weather system rattling in from the Atlantic. That will bring some rain in the north. It will also introduce some milder southwesterly winds as well. We start chilly though on Friday. Some sunshine around. We will tend to cloud over more from the west. A little light rain or drizzle here and there. Hanging on to sunshine for longest for East Anglia and the southeast of England. Temperatures 8 or 9 degrees here. It'll be milder further north in that cloud, and in Scotland 11 degrees. That's where we've got most of the rain in northern parts of the country. Quick look at the weekend, and it's still quite windy actually on Saturday. Very mild once again. Most places will be dry. Cooler on Sunday, mind you, but it will turn wet and windy in the north later on. Sophie.
Darren, thank you. A reminder now of our main story this evening. Westminster waits for the report that could determine the Prime Minister's future amid more calls for him to resign. That's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.